heard the FEMA director warn the disaster fund is running out of money. And if Congress doesn't pass a spending bill by mid-September, that funding could lapse. So that got me thinking, what does that mean for Maui and the relief efforts there? Or what happens if there's another natural disaster? And speaking of Maui, did the government really only give disaster victims $700? And why did it take the president almost 2 weeks to show up there? Joining me now to talk about all of these things is the FEMA Associate Administrator, Ann Bink. Ann, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I want to start with Maui and obviously the deadliest wildfire that we've seen in this country in more than a century. My question is, where do you see the recovery effort now? And what do you think it looks like in, say, the next couple of weeks?
Absolutely. Right now, we're working not only on the search and recovery aspect of the disaster, which we're about 87% complete with our search efforts. Now, as you may have already heard, that last 13% involves some more complex spaces, more multi-floor buildings. So it may take some time to work through those spaces as well, but the search and recovery efforts continue. And while those search and recovery efforts are continuing, we're doing everything we can on the ground to get folks to register for assistance if they were impacted by this disaster. So the phone number to register is 1-800-621-3362. That's 621 FEMA. You can also register on disasterassistance.gov or on the FEMA app. It's very important to register, even if you think you're not eligible, but let's say you were displaced by this disaster. Red Cross is helping us get folks that have been displaced into hotel rooms at no cost to the survivor, including wraparound services. So things you need like medical care, spiritual care, mental health care, case management, all of the things that can be necessary after a truly catastrophic incident like this.
Where do you see this, though, in the next couple of weeks? Do you see that search effort sort of wrapping up? Do you feel like it's coming to an end at this point?
Yes, within the next few weeks, we'd expect that portion of the search and recovery to wrap up and then really move quickly into debris removal phase, which really means starting to clear the debris from the fire to allow for rebuilding efforts and community revitalization in the way folks and residents of Maui want to rebuild. That was a big point of emphasis that the president discussed when he was on the ground a few days ago. And that is really our main focus, right? Working closely with the community leaders, cultural leaders within the community to come together and talk about what the folks of Maui want Maui to look like after this incident. So that can take a while, and this will be a long recovery because it was such a catastrophic incident, but we'll do everything in our power as FEMA and the full federal family to expedite that recovery for the folks of Maui.
You know, I want to talk about the actual victims in all of this. I am wondering, what exactly is that $700 payment? There's been so much talk about it. And is that all that these victims are getting? And then the last part of that question is, what would you say to the people, the victims, who are very vocally saying that that's sort of a slap in their face?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that $700 payment is really for critical needs assistance. It's kind of like an advance payment. Folks that have been impacted by this disaster, that have lost property, that have lost their personal effects, that have other needs, those are all part of the individual assistance program that folks register for after a disaster. I encourage everyone to register that's been impacted by this disaster, because that $700 is really just the first payment. During that time that we release that payment, we're working with the applicant and the survivor to make sure that we're providing all the cash assistance we can against what needs they may have. So, for instance, if they tragically lost their home in this incident, we reimburse for uninsured losses up to $41,000. That's just one example. So that $700 is a very small portion of the overall assistance that will be and is being provided to survivors that were impacted by this incident.
And what would you say to them, some of them who feel sort of offended by that number?
Please call us back. If you've received a $700 payment and you haven't received any information about other cash assistance you're eligible for, please call that number I mentioned. Again, it's 1-800-621-3362. Or you can come into a disaster recovery center we've set up at Maui College. That is another area where you can go. You can speak directly to FEMA representatives who are there to help you and walk you through the entire process. And there's also state agencies there, agencies like Vital Records, where if you lost critical records like birth certificates, DMV if you lost your license in the fire, basically it's a one-stop shop for all you need. We'll be able to talk you through the process and help you understand where you are. And if there's other questions we have for you to provide that remaining cash assistance that you're eligible for.
You know, Ann, I have covered a lot of natural disasters in my career, and I'm sure you've been on the ground for a lot of them as well. And I'm trying to figure out what is different this time, because I cannot remember, maybe Hurricane Katrina in 2005 maybe was the last time I've really seen this sort of pushback from victims of a natural disaster to the federal government's response. I mean, we've had wildfires, we've had tremendously devastating hurricanes in Florida, we've had flooding, and I don't remember this kind of pushback. So again, the question is, what is different in Maui? Is there something about this particular disaster that's making it more difficult?
It's a great question. And this disaster was a no-notice, extremely catastrophic incident to a community, and frankly, a community of high cultural significance, right? This was the capital of the former kingdom of Hawaii. It's an important place for many reasons. It's a place that folks spent generations. These homes have been around for a long time. This is a place where which is of much significance. And this happens in many disasters, but just the no-notice nature of this incident. I was on the ground a week ago, and the trauma was palpable. It's heart-wrenching to be there and to see the devastation firsthand, and to wrap your arms around the community. And I hugged many survivors of this disaster and just said, we will be here. And I think it's up to us, it's up to FEMA, it's up to all of our federal counterparts, our nonprofit partners like Red Cross, to keep showing up and to keep being part of the community and to keep checking in on folks. We need to build the trust, and we will continue to build that trust. Yeah. And I'd also say, please, use reputable sources to get your information, right? There's a lot of misinformation out there, which may be fueling some of the distrust, but we are there to help. Please visit us at the DRC, the Disaster Recovery Center, and you will also see us in the community. We're out in the community every day engaging with folks to make sure that if they have needs, they get those met.
One of the other things that I've heard, especially online a lot from the victims, is what took the president why did it take almost 2 weeks for him to show up? Can you explain to people why sort of presidents don't show up to disaster areas right immediately? Or was this out of the ordinary?
Yeah, so immediately following the incident, the administrator, FEMA administrator, was on the ground within days, right? And that's typically how disasters work, right? Because you want the expert, the FEMA administrator, to be on the ground to assess the situation and provide feedback and to provide her expertise back to the president. They are in and were in regular contract throughout the incident. And continue to be. Is
there a reason why the president doesn't come? Why it was just the administrator right off the bat?
In the early days, the entire area is really an active search and rescue, search and recovery scene. And certainly that, can often be difficult to host a distinguished visitor at the same time.
One of the things the president said when he was on the ground was that FEMA and the federal government was going to be with Maui, with Hawaii, through the duration of this. And I'm wondering, has FEMA sort of put a ballpark estimate on what a recovery effort would look like for this? Is it in the hundreds of millions of dollars, or is it in the tens of billions of dollars at this point?
Certainly too early to tell, but it would not be a surprise if $1 billion or more was the ballpark for this, just given the nature of the disaster and the work that will go into debris removal and ultimately rebuilding. But it's just too early to tell at this time.
Okay. Speaking of the money, I think something that perked up my ears was when the FEMA administrator earlier this week said that the FEMA disaster funds could potentially run out as soon as mid-September. I, of course, know the president put that $12 billion of the supplemental budget request to Congress when they're considering the budget for fiscal year 24. And I'm wondering, is $12 billion enough?
So it will be enough, and it is enough right now to address any immediate response needs and the initial recovery for individuals and the efforts on the ground for Hawaii. When the disaster relief fund is assessed. We ensure that we have funds to not only address immediate response needs in Hawaii, but in future incidents. So if those funds continue to reduce, what it would mean is that those longer term public infrastructure projects would likely be pushed in timeline into the next fiscal year. So no impact on initial recovery or response efforts.
So even if there's another, God forbid, another horrible disaster somewhere, a major hurricane somewhere, these disaster funds, maybe say it's coming in late September, right, there's no fear that disaster funds would run out for those victims.
That's correct.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about these projects that would be put off. What kind of projects are you talking about?
So if you think about long-term recoveries, and you've probably covered some of them, you're really talking about, in some cases, rebuilding public infrastructure, things like roads, bridges, buildings, future projects, mitigation projects. So it really depends on what projects are being developed and are up next. The next fiscal year is just around the corner, starts October 1. So we wouldn't be talking about a long-term delay, but potentially short-term for some of that recovery work.
And lastly, is there something in particular that a message you want to get out to the people of Maui in particular, or anyone dealing with a natural disaster that may be encountering FEMA?
Yeah, just wanted to say we're here to help, and we will do everything in our power to get you the assistance and the support you need to recover from the incident you faced and the trauma you faced through that. So, and that runs the gamut, right? If you visit us at a disaster recovery center, you'll see the Red Cross there, you will see us there, you'll see state agencies there, really to wrap our arms around you and support you in all of the things you may need after a disaster as tragic as this one. So please reach out, please call, please register for assistance as soon as you can.
All right, Ann, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.